Good morning, Warwick Assembly. Just wanted to give an introduction to a new series I will be beginning Sunday. I've entitled it, He Touched Me, and it really emphasizes the power of the human touch. Before this pandemic seasons, I was able to see that there were several challenges that we individually and as a church are facing. One of the things is that because of technology and also conveniences in life, there's a lot of places in which we used to be involved. There was a platform, there was human contact with, because of busyness of life and conveniences. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but just think with me for a moment. Now we can go and order our groceries where we used to go shopping, have interaction. Now we can just pick them up and just go home. We used to go to malls, department stores, because we needed to purchase things. Now it's convenience. And we have Amazon and other websites in which we can order things and deliver to our home. You also find contact now with church. You can be and have and enjoy the service of online church services. And these things are great. But the reality is that that personal touch that we have in our world seems to be decreasing because of the demands of life. We also find that to a certain extent, life becomes so busy and at times distracting that it seems that we're driven rather than being led. And as a believer, it is so important that we're led of the Spirit. The reason I mention these things is because when the encounter that Jesus had with this Samaritan woman, the writer says that one translation says he was pressed to go. One translation says that he was needed to go. One translation says there was an urgency for him to go, this encounter. Interesting, in the introduction of the Samaritan woman, she says, but Jesus, you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan. And the reality, what she's saying is, me and you don't have this kind of relationship. We don't even talk to each other. There is such hostility and there is so much division between Samaritans and Jews that I don't know why you're here to talk to me. Because as we read commentators and different ones, they said there was such hostility that if a Jew had to get up to the other side of Samaria, they would literally go around in order not to go through. And in all these points I'm making, I'm going to be bringing in the next 3 or 4 weeks. But as we find this conversation that Jesus is having with this woman, it seems as though he's tearing down every excuse, every barrier that this woman had. Interesting is that Jesus never physically touched her, but yet we find the results of his touch when she runs into town and tells the town people, this man that has told me all things. It was so impacting that the people goes back to Jesus to inquire and to see for themselves the testimony that this woman had given her. And so in this series for the next 3 or 4 weeks, I just want our hearts to be challenged concerning this human touch. And I know we have Facebook Live, and I know that gives us a platform to be able to preach the gospel to masses. I understand it, and I think it's a great moment. It's a powerful time for us. But I just want us to understand there is nothing like a human touch upon someone else that is impacting, whether it's through the words, through tears, through a touch, through a handshake, through an embracing, a hug. That element of human touch is what Jesus teaches us throughout the New Testament. I have several experiences, and I want to be careful in what I express simply because of time, but I will give you two stories that happened the same day. Even though there were 3 stories, I will only tell you of 2. I remember that particular moment I had been praying, and I was saying, God, today, as I move through my day, Lord, just lead me to people. Just lead me to those you want me to touch. And the reality is that sometimes in life, we're just moving and life becomes common and we find common things in life and we just keep moving, never aware or looking for opportunity. And that morning, as I left, I was going to get a cup of coffee, and as I'm driving, there's a guy with a gas can, with a milk jug, and we know what that means. He's walking, milk jug, he ran out of gas. And so I remember I pulled over and I said, listen, let me give you a ride to the gas station. It wasn't far. He says, no, I'm good. I said, no, I'll just get in. And I understand, don't pick up strangers or things like that, because I know the situations, but I really felt impressed that morning because of the prayer, looking I really felt impressed to do this. And so he got in the car. I took him to the gas station. He got his jug full, and now he was going to walk. And I said, no, I'll take you back. He says, you don't have to do that. I said, I understand that, but just let me take you back. So he got in the car, and it wasn't far, maybe 2-3 minutes. But in that moment of 2 or 3 minutes alone, he saw something that I had, and he says, are you a believer? I see this book you're reading. I said, yeah, I am. And we began to have this conversation. And just before I took him to his car, we got to his car, he says, would you do me a favor? He says, this is what I'm experiencing in my life. And he says, do you have a moment to just pray for me? And I said, absolutely. And did I lead him to the Lord? That opportunity never availed itself, but I believe that day through this encounter, God was able to drop a seed in this man's life. And I believe that was impacting in this man's life. Then I went back to the office. I did a few things, and I had another encounter. I'm not going to tell you that one, but I did a couple other things, and now it's lunchtime, and I'm debating where I'm going to go eat. And now I felt, for some reason, this restaurant that's off of Highway 60 there in Plant City, and it's called the Latino Restaurant. I love the Latino Restaurant. I love Spanish food. I'm Spanish. I'm Puerto Rican. I love food. But I didn't want to eat that. But yet I felt like, go to the Latino market. And I'm in this conflict because I feel like I need to go, but I didn't want to eat that. And so finally, 3 or 4 moments, as though it seemed like somebody was just really pushing me, I got in the car. And again, right there on 60, there's a big gas area. I don't remember if it was a raceway or racetrack, but it was just one of those big gas stations and convenience stores. And so I pulled in there, and as I'm pulling in, I see this guy, and his car is parked by a gas station. And I see him conversing. I saw him once, but I stayed there because I was just interested in what was going on. And there was 3 or 4 people, and finally the 4th person took something out of their pocket, gave it to him. The man went inside and then put some gas, put it back on, and by that time I had moved close enough, and I said, hey, how you doing? He said, I'm doing good. I said, you trying to get gas? He said, yeah. And he says, I understand, but I had a gentleman give me $5. Back then, understand, gas was pretty high at that time. I think gas was like $2.70, $2.80 a gallon. And I said, well, that's not going to get you much gas. Where are you going? He says, I'm going to Lakeland. And I said, let me get you some gas. He said, you don't have to do that. I said, no, let me get you some gas. So I took the gas can out, cap off, and I got the nozzle, put it in, and I began to give him gas. Now, in my mind, I already had determined what I was going to give the man. I was going to give him about $15, $20 worth of gas. It would help him. It would bless him. And I remember this voice saying to me, if that was you that needed gas, how much gas would you need? And I knew the answer. I said, Lord, I would want a full tank. He says, okay. And so, of course, I got to fill the tank. And it was like $45. And I put the gas cap back on his car and shuts. And I noticed as I closed it that he's in the car looking for something. And finally he comes out and he has a pencil, he has a piece of paper. And I said, what are you doing? He says, I want to get your name and your address, because he says, I want to send this money back to you. I said, you're not going to send the money back to me. And he says, why would you do what you're doing? I said, because I'm doing a series at my present church, and it deals with paying forward. And I said, we've been doing acts of kindness like this. I'm looking for needs. And so all I can tell you is that, listen, as I have ministered to you and I have blessed you, I said, when you leave this moment, just look for opportunities to bless other people. And all of a sudden, he begins to say, but why would you do that? I said, well, I'm a minister. And the love of Jesus is so real in my life. And God has been so good to me that all I want to do is just go and freely bless and freely give. And in that moment, this man began to weep uncontrollably. And finally, when he could stop and compose himself enough to speak, he said, this moment has been impacting to me. He says, let me tell you, he says, I was serving the Lord and I was attending my church. I'm a married man, and he says, with my wife, there was a moment of infidelity, and she packed her bags and literally left me. And he says, I was hurting so bad. On top of that hurt, he says, the church I was attending did not believe in divorce. And so I was excommunicated from the church, and I was literally kicked out. And he says, I have gone through life with a sense of resentment and bitterness. And he says, and then you do this right here, and something has penetrated my heart. And I'm sorry for weeping, but he says this weeping is an expression of how much I miss God and how much that hurt. And in that moment, I want you to know that I got to pray for the man, and God restored his relationship and healed his heart. And it was just a great experience. And so as I begin this series of messages, Jesus is embodying and showing us how to approach humanity through this conversation that he had with this woman. I will say to you that in our life, the emptiness often that we feel in our walk with God, the emptiness that churches are facing is right here, found right here in this moment. The fact that there was something that was released physically and spiritually. The woman with a little bit of oil teaches us a little bit about that. As long as there was empty vessels, and as long as she was pouring oil, the oil was flowing. To think that you and I have this oil of joy, oil of healing, oil of anointing. And yet, if we're not pouring into empty vessels, then there is no flowing. Because in that story concerning the woman with a little bit of oil, it says that when there were no longer any vessels, the oil stayed. What does that mean? The oil stopped flowing. On that day, it was like God was saying to me, apparently spiritually, I needed a refueling, because all three encounters dealt with not having gas and needing to be filled up. And to me that day, it just seemed like the Lord was again speaking to my heart that this thing about being filled is related to releasing. And I want to say to you today, if you feel spiritually empty, what you need to do is go find somewhere where you can empty what's inside of you, and something's going to happen. Not because I'm saying it, because it is a spiritual principle of God's word. And I'll guarantee you, when you release what is in you, in some action, behavior, words, touch, blessing, there is something that's going to come in you, fresh, renewing, energizing, and empowering. I want to challenge you for the next 4 weeks, not just to listen, but to hear what the Spirit of the Lord would say. I get concerned sometimes where evangelism becomes a program. Evangelism is not a program. Evangelism to the believer must be a lifestyle, not something that you study, not something that you have memorized, but something that just naturally flows out of you. Remember, Acts 1:8, you shall receive power after that the Holy Spirit has come into you. Why? To be that witness. Challenge you today. Release the blessing, release the anointing, the oil of joy, and see what will happen in your life. God bless you.